All right, good evening. I would like, I would like to call this policy meeting to order, beginning with a school board director roll call. Let's start with the folks in the room. Susan?
Jennifer Loman here.
Charles Burdell Williams, present.
Is that all that's in?
Mia Blitzstein present?
Caroline Watts present.
Thank you.
Zachary Epps present.
Yes. All right, thank you so much. We will now have an approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Right. Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, not hearing any nays. I'm turning the meeting over to April Lee.
Sure. So the first policy we have on the list this evening is policy in AR 806, child abuse policy. It was last revised in 2021. There were minor changes to the policy. There was a section of the policy that was reordered, but in large part, this policy remains the same. There were also some recommendations to change some terminology that reflect current school code terms. So nothing really substantively changing about this policy. There were just things that were moved around and some terms that were updated consistent with school code. Questions?
Scroll down. I'm sorry, I'm going down a little bit in the AR. What are these ARs? I look at which is no, it must have been. It's a different AR.
Okay, yeah. All right. If you find it after the fact,
okay,
just send us a message. Any board members online?
Zachary,
I
have a question.
Yeah. I think just as a note, I think we've been pulling the definitions up to the policy as opposed to the AR. I was wondering if this is another area where we need to do that. And then I guess I do have a question, given we've been, something that is in the AR, I think around training of staff, including paraprofessionals. And I know in recent conversations, paraprofessionals that are directly hired by the district go through certain onboarding and training and things like that, but we weren't able to. And there's also language in the AR that says our contractors, kind of alludes to the same thing. So I wanted to get a bit of clarification for hires that are not directly through the district. What areas of training are actually required and or not?
For our
because in a recent conversation, I'm sorry, was that a question for clarification for me?
So I was going to say our substitute agencies are required to provide the same training that we do for our staff, which is the Act 126. All of our substitute agencies they have to provide that training as well.
so ask a question about that. I haven't had to take that training myself. That's essentially about the requirements
related
of the law.
To child abuse.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, it's like a mandatory reporter.
Right. Recognition of the signs.
Recognition of the signs. Right. Yeah. So it's not. It's
a video.
Yeah.
About 3 hours. Well, it is. It's 3-hour videos, 2 sections, and it has to be done every 5 years.
Yeah, I get that part. I guess it was I guess I was looking for clarity. Something I heard, and it was really a statement, but it may have been beyond child abuse, but really in specific to, I think, paraprofessionals, that there were certain types of training that if they are hired by a third party, they weren't required or we couldn't like enforce or something. And if I'm just completely off, just correct me where I'm wrong, but I feel like I heard that actually in a recent community meeting that we had, specific to paraprofessionals that are not hired by the district.
Our contractors who have direct contact with kids should be going through the training. And when we have contracts with different organizations that send staff to us, we generally build provisions into those contracts that require them not only to comply with all board policies, including 806, but we also usually include a provision that states that those folks need background checks, child abuse certifications. They have to get TB testing. They go through child abuse training. They go through employment history reviews. So we do ask all of our providers that send, again, our contractors that send us staff to do those things. We could look operationally at what's being done to make sure that takes place, but by policy and by contract, those are the provisions that are in place to make sure that any adults that have direct contact with kids in schools do receive that training and the background checks.
I'm sorry, Jen.
That's okay. Mr. Epps, I'm wondering if maybe you're asking about sort of more substantive training, like the professional development that we offer our staff. Is that maybe?
Like the
Yeah, and
safety
that's why I said it might actually, the types of trainings that were discussed in may have been beyond child abuse and more just in the role of like the functions of the job. And so that's why I wanted to get clarity on where that line is versus what's required versus not. So it sounds like for the topics that we're talking about tonight, it's required as a matter of contract, but there might be some trainings that are a function of your job, just day-to-day functions. That's a different conversation, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. That adds clarity.
Ms. Blitzstein, did you have your hand up? I thought I saw your hand up, but maybe it came
I
down.
did. I was just trying to also clarify what I thought Mr. Epps was looking for. But maybe it was just specific to paraprofessionals, so it's all good. Thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
First one.
All right, we can move on then.
Great. So policy 860 is our maintaining appropriate boundaries with students policy. We added a few definitions to the policy for the definition of district adults and the definition of legitimate educational interests. There's a statement in this policy that independent contractors that do business with the district are required to make sure that their employees are informed of the provisions of this policy. And then in the AR, we removed the definitions from the AR because they got added into the policy. There were some cosmetic changes through the rest of the document, very, very, very minor updates. And then there is some revised language similar to the last policy to reflect current school code language. And that is basically those are basically the edits to 860.
Any questions from both? Seeing none, do we have questions from?
I have a question about, and I was gonna listen to the discussion of each of the the policies to understand where this might actually apply. With AR 806, that is specific.
Name and where.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Would you please tell us your name and where you reside?
Absolutely. Erin Fideko. I reside on Ware Road, and I have a child at Taunton Elementary in Cedar Brook. This is specifically stating basically the legalities of mandated reporting and training for adults. I would like to understand more, and the reason for my presence here tonight is the policy that includes the procedures and responses around child or student abuse when it stems from another child. Someone who is defined in this policy as 14 years or younger, such as we might encounter at the elementary level. I'm not sure where that policy or list of procedures exists, and I was waiting to hear perhaps that is under threat assessment or maintaining appropriate boundaries, or does it exist? And if it does not exist, then that is something I would like to speak up for.
Sure. So student on student conduct would generally be in the 200 series of our policy manual. There is board policy on bullying. There's board policy on harassment, discrimination, hazing. We have a code of conduct that talks about, there's an elementary code of conduct and a secondary code of conduct that talks about inappropriate physical contact between students. So anything student on student would generally be in the 200 series of the policy manual. I don't think, it doesn't appear that any of those specific policies are on this agenda, but they are active online. 860 and 806 are not intended to encompass child on child conduct, except for the limited purpose that in 806, there are certain categories of crimes, and they're spelled out here. I can actually put them up on the screen, where under the mandated reporting statute, when certain child on child situations do arise, while they are not child abuse, they are child on child crimes that have to be reported as part of the mandated reporter law. So those are the 6 items you see on the screen there. That would be rape, involuntary deviant, sexual intercourse, sexual assault, aggravated indecent assault, and indecent exposure. And those are all defined in the crimes code, like what those terms mean, and the citations are there. But outside of these 2 policies, as I mentioned, we have a lot of policies that do apply to students.
I have reviewed several of those 200 policies and find that they lack specificity and do not include information on specific follow-up actions and supports to students and families. And I think CES parents are looking for some more clarity in terms of steps taken when we have an incident that might be detailed here in this particular policy code. And so if this is not the appropriate venue to discuss that, I would like to ask that it be put on a future agenda to discuss the very specific way that we are responding to that student on student crime. I wouldn't use the word crime. That was what you said. So that was
These items here, numbers 1 through 6, they are crimes, right? They come right from the crimes code.
and that's with children under 14, correct?
These crimes here do not have to, that could be
All ages.
students that are 17 or 7, right?
Is there an opportunity at which we could discuss the 200 policy?
Yes, it wouldn't be, I'll leave it to the chair.
We have a couple of policies that we've been really trying to get to, one of which is our cell phone policy, which we hope to have. I don't know, I don't think it will be on consideration next policy meeting, but that is a policy that has been sort of a long time coming that I know is up for consideration. I think that we also had a few other ones that we were hoping to get to before the end of the school year. So I'm not sure, actually. We'd have to look back at what we had on the list and then make a decision.
I'll just take this opportunity to encourage urgency on this particular policy, given the concerns that are being raised at Cheltenham Elementary, the community meeting last week. I think it would be a wise move to revisit this with some community input.
Which policy?
That's what I'm trying to understand is exactly that 200 student to student. We have, if you want me to pull it up for you.
218 is the
Student discipline 218, 26,
218 is the main one.
Yeah.
For student discipline. And that's the one with the chart regarding elementary and secondary student discipline.
233 suspension and expulsion, 236 threat assessment.
Well, we're looking at 230.
So all of those pertinent policies.
I believe threat assessment is next on the agenda, actually, or on this agenda at number 4.
Yeah.
Well, we can take that under consideration.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Anybody on that?
I don't see hands. All right, so we can, Ms. Murphy, go on to item 3.
Item 3.
Okay, so item 3 is policy of AR 350, educator misconduct. This policy is the policy that largely relates to the Educator Discipline Act, which is Pennsylvania's statute that governs professional employees in schools. So there were only very, very minor changes to the terminology in the Title IX sexual harassment and discrimination section, just so that all of our policies now that touch Title IX, they all use consistent terminology for what we mean by discrimination and harassment that falls within Title IX. So very few and no substantive changes to either document.
Questions? Yes.
Mr. Biasio, I just want to make sure I'm getting this one straight. Is this this is the Educator Misconduct Act that PDE has a complaint process for, and that if someone files a complaint with PDE, then it gets sent back to the school district to investigate? Is that this process? Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
So this is not really something that we have created, like, internally, that this is a PDE.
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes, all of the content here and the definitions come from state statute.
Okay.
Any questions? Mr. Bianchi, we can go forward.
Okay, so number 4 is policy in AR 236. It's our threat assessment policy. It was last revised in 2023. There was a recent change to state law, which stated that threat assessment teams need to timely coordinate with law enforcement, juvenile justice agencies, court agencies, healthcare providers, behavioral service providers, in connection with a threat assessment. So we have added the piece that was missing before. There was not language around timely consultation, particularly with law enforcement. So that has been built in. That is just consistent with a recent change to state law. We added a definition here for what threat assessment is. I don't believe there were any other changes to the policy, and on the regulation, we indicated here that in connection with a threat assessment, if information comes to light as part of that threat assessment, that there should be other allegations or reports investigated that relate to any other policy, that this policy refers you to those other policies, which all have investigation protocol outlined. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a hazing policy, we have a bullying policy, we have a discrimination and harassment policy. Each of those policies has investigation protocol in them. And so frequently in connection with threat assessments, the threat assessment will reveal underlying allegations that require investigation under other board policies. So we just kind of called those out here. And I believe that was the only other substantive change. These changes that you're seeing here on the screen are just terminology changes consistent with the changes that we talked about in some of the previous policies.
Okay. This is the one with that's missing a word.
Oh.
You go down the AR a little bit.
In the AR? Sure.
Yeah.
Was it in the green?
Down further. It was in green, yeah.
Okay.
There you go, where it says the possession, use, sale of alcohol or tobacco products or conduct that constitutes HB an offense listed in the school and safety provisions of the school code.
Lower?
No, that one where you're at.
Where you're at.
Green. Tobacco contains conduct that constitutes.
Sale or conduct that constitutes, I think it should be an offense listed.
Yes. Okay. How's that?
Thank you. I do have
Yeah.
a substantive question too.
Sure.
What triggers the, I know it's probably, I know it's in this somewhere. What triggers the threat assessment team meeting or?
So I think that can come about in a lot of different ways. I think that can come through, safe to say, I think that can come through a student self-report. I think that can come through an educator or other district employee. I think at times peers will report to a school official something that their peers are going through. So it can really come from anywhere.
And do we have one threat assessment team? Okay.
Any more questions?
Or anything included in the policy that dictates how threats are communicated to family. And if a threat assessment team is active, say in a child's classroom, you know, that there would be a way for families to be aware of that information.
So the majority of the time, a student-specific threat assessment would be a confidential student matter. There are provisions in the school code that do relate to certain parent notifications. For example, at one of our recent policy committee meetings, we looked at our weapons policies, right? So if there's a weapon in the building, state law now requires us to notify, depending on where the incident takes place. If it's in a school, the school gets notified. If it's at an extracurricular activity, folks that are, attending the extracurricular activity. So there are times when threats get communicated. Most of the time, though, these threat assessments are individualized threat assessments. They're not necessarily, I don't want to overgeneralize here, but the majority of the time, the threat assessment team gets pulled together because a child poses a threat to themselves. And that's the overwhelming majority of threat assessments that the district would perform. That's not to say that that's every case, but a lot of times a threat assessment team will get called because of self-harming behavior, thoughts of suicidal thoughts, self-harm, those types of things, risky behavior, whether it be drugs or alcohol. That's what would cause a threat assessment team to come together. That doesn't mean that when a child is presenting in school in a way that is threatening to others, that it doesn't involve a threat assessment team. But most of the time when these teams come together, it's because of a student that is generally a threat to themselves.
I think that my concern coming from where I'm coming from is that these policies seem really geared toward the higher grades. We're talking drugs, weapons, violent, intentions perhaps at a broader school level. But I think that this also needs to be applicable to the elementary level in a functional way. And I'm curious about how you see this policy applying at younger.
I don't have information about what building administrators see day in and day out. That can be a follow-up item, or if there's anyone on the call that wants to speak to that. Threat assessment teams are required by law, and the steps that the school district has to take are memorialized in this policy. The policy applies K to 12, right? So this is not, from a definitional standpoint or a scope standpoint, it's not limited to older students. Whether or not we see more of these with middle and high school students, that very well could be. I don't have the data. I don't want to misspeak.
Yes.
Do you have a question around some of these? I understand for self-harming behaviors, that is a very single student specific item. Or some of the other items such as bullying or dating violence or hazing, when a threat assessment team is investigating a situation that does affect multiple students, how are the families of those collective students communicated with via this policy, if at all?
Yeah. Doc, do we have somebody online that may want to speak to that? Whether it's, I don't know the protocol in and out at the schools, but we may have somebody online.
And even just what is the framework by which those decisions are made would be helpful. And I think speak to the question coming from the public.
So that is in the student handbooks that we have vetted at both the elementary, the middle, and the high school. If it's not clearly delineated as part of that work, that is definitely something we can revisit, which I think is the ask.
And since I know that we have many members of the public who probably have not attended policy committee meetings, I will say what I often say, which is just framing in a school system, you have policies which are the highest level and generally take a lot to change. And therefore the operational details are relegated to an administrative regulation, which is that's what AR stands for. So the policy would tend to frame the purpose of the policy, the expectations of what the policy is meant to accomplish. And it may say the policy may say something along the lines of administration is charged with creating the details. To use an example, an energy policy wouldn't specify what the thermostat should be set to, but it would say that the AR needs to specify what the thermostat is set to, for instance. And then the next level down from that would be building level handbooks, which goes down to being specific to what that building level needs. So that isn't meant to be anything but context. And so that's, please correct me if I under-explained anything, Mr. Diallo.
No, I think that's great.
So Doug, as part of our work, we are gonna be looking at those student handbooks that are by level and making sure it encompasses some of the points that you are raising.
Specificity is really important. I have documents to be, of course, very general in their nature because they have to apply to all students, and I understand that. But part of the frustration with communication is that being referred to a handbook or a policy that offers no specifics is not really an answer.
Sure. Policy 255 is educational opportunity for military children. We just actually adopted this policy also in response to state law in 2024. And the definition of children of military families, the state statute was amended to add number 4 here. So we added number 4 to the definition of children of military families. That's consistent with the law. And I believe that was, yes, that was the only change here.
Any more questions?
E27 is our conflict of interest policy. We had some recommendations from the Pennsylvania School Boards Association to add clarification to the definition of conflict of interest about some guidance they received from through federal audits that we needed to add a clarifying statement to the definition of conflict of interest. Again, not a very substantive change here. We did add a statement that the district will provide written notification of whistleblower protections and folks that report conflicts of interest. So these policies are put on our website and periodically shared with staff. So those were the 2 changes to 27. And lastly, 619 is our district audit policy. This had not been looked at. This was a policy that was up for routine review. It had been 6 years since we last looked at it. So we took a look at the most current recommended policy from the School Boards Association and just moved some things around. You can see like the language that was under the purpose has been moved down under the authority. Nothing really substantively changing to the policy. We did clarify that the district's annual financial report gets submitted to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. There used to be deadlines called out here, but frequently there are extensions to those deadlines. And so instead of calling out a specific date, we just added language that we will comply with the applicable deadlines.
Yes, Mr. Schultz.
So I recognize that we don't want specific dates if they are inaccurate. However, when it says the required deadline, I'm left unsure what that means, where that deadline comes from, and if we could clarify the required deadline.
Yes, we can.
According to X.
Sure. Yep. I think that's a good. Yep. Do that.
And I guess it's also worth noting, I know that we have, frankly, through no fault of the districts, had trouble with, just as an industry, I know that public auditing firms are hard to come by right now. Mm-hmm. It's just there aren't many options, and the people that are there are overloaded. So I don't think we cannot pass a policy that changes the resources available to us by the industry, but it seems like if that is a challenge we face. So I don't know if there's anything we can do to, as a board, be supportive through policy language and give something that our business manager can then put in front of firms and say, hey, I am required to do this according to my policy. Can you take this and be more aggressive?
I think the auditing firms are keenly aware of the requirements, but to your point, there is a shortage of them.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board members? Yes.
Just to add on to Mr. Schultz's point related to the specificity around what drives the specific deadline, looking lower all the way at the bottom of the policy was the specifics around when the revision to a report would need to be sent. It also includes a similar line, no later than the required deadline for such submission. And it just feels very ambiguous.
Yeah,
so
we'll go back and I will pull the exact law where that comes from, and we'll add it here.
that would be helpful.
Yes.
just from a process perspective, we have quorum now, so we're able to recommend the first read, whatever it might be. So those changes could be made and be part of the first read.
Correct. We'll
So we
make
wouldn't
those
need to
changes
read first.
before the end of the week when you get your board packet for next week. Yep.
Any other? Any in the public? Okay. Any no other questions? Comments? None online?
No, I don't see any hands raised. Oh, wait, there is one now.
Well, let's see.
It looks like Elizabeth S.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Would you
Hi.
please give your full name and where you reside in the district?
It's Elizabeth Schroeder. I live in Elkins Park, so my son goes to Cheltenham Elementary School. My question was about what Dr. Scriven said about reviewing the student handbook and policies in regards to another gentleman's question about those. He said there's plans to revisit and revise those. I wanted to know what the expected timeline for that would be.
So just so that I'm clear with what I stated, didn't say anything about revising at this point. The first thing before we revise is that we need to review. We're going to be having a couple of next steps where we're working collaboratively with families, especially at CES. And that is going to be part of the conversation that we collaboratively have around a student handbook. So those invites and organization will happen within the next couple of weeks.
Okay, so we'll be reviewing the handbook within the next few weeks, is what you're saying?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
Thank you. Ms. Lemon?
One thing about the handbooks, for some of you who haven't been at these meetings often, there's been some beating of the drum over the past few years that we needed to revise those handbooks, and they have been revised, and they are in a much better state than they were just a few years ago. So appreciate the administrative efforts to make that happen. I just looked at all of them actually recently around, because when I was looking for information about the cell phone policies, and all 4 elementary school handbooks are consistent with one another, and Cedarbrook and the high schools have been revised as well. And that is that was a fairly big lift, I will say, because especially at the elementary level, those handbooks were all not consistent with one another.
Correct. Yeah, that was a summer initiative. My office worked with the Office of Education. We came together. There were a couple principals, elementary and secondary, that sort of collaborated. The goal was to move, at least at the elementary level, to try to get to one handbook so that the 4 schools didn't have vastly different handbooks. So the handbooks, to your point, are in better shape than they've been in a long time. And they were just comprehensively looked at last summer. So.
Any other questions? Mr. Schultz?
I will just say, since I missed the roll call, for the record, Daniel Schultz present, and I apologize. The front door was locked. I was here 1 minute later than start.
Sorry.
No problem. Since there are people here, I wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
For that clarification. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Could you just for the record again? Okay, thank you.
I just want to say that I appreciate Dr. Scriven's willingness to include families as we review handbook. I understand it was a heavy lift on the part of administration and principals. I think it's very important to have family input, and although it makes sense at an administrative level to have a handbook that is consistent across elementary schools, our elementary schools are indeed different and have different programming and perhaps require different policies or procedures in certain circumstances. So that will be a very helpful way to communicate with as we work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Any questions online that we did not catch?
I don't see any hands up. No, I don't see any additional questions.
Okay, so may I have, okay, Mr. Bedell Williams.
Yeah, I guess just a quick process question similar to those your regular larger than usual crowd. So procedurally, the items that we reviewed today this was our first opportunity to see them. They will come in front of the board for what's called a first read on the agenda for the next legislative meeting. If in fact we approve them at that first read, they'll come back for a second read. We approve for a second read. In between the first and second read, there will be another policy meeting and another opportunity to provide input in between the first and second read. If there are substantial changes, we can move the policy back to the first read and start the process over again. The goal then being after the second read, we are then reviewing those policies for approval at that point. So this is our first opportunity to discuss the 7 items that were listed today. They will appear at the next agenda in this form as old business. And I think we'll have an agenda of new items, I believe, as noted by Jenny's earlier comment related to the number of items that we do want to review. That list is led by the policy committee as well as Ed's office and the human resources office. Just wanted to make sure that context applied, and if in fact I did miss anything or speak anything out of order, also welcome any additional context from.
Oh, that was very good. I just want to add that the next meeting will be a combination of policy and ed affairs. Which will be May 26th.
Just one other note, because I just want to express some genuine appreciation for the number of members of the public that are either here in person or online. Policy committee meetings are very important because this is where we have a chance to shape as a board. But as a board, we pass a budget, we oversee the superintendent specifically, and we pass policies. Those are the 3 core functions of the board. So this committee meeting is sometimes it's very mundane. It's just the state changed their state code and we don't really have much control over the language. We have to simply adopt the new language. But there are times when critical conversations are happening and feedback from the public is a really important way for us to incorporate into a refined policy that strikes that balance between specificity, different needs of different students, and making sure that we as a district are living up to our values. So just genuinely thank you for being here.
Thank you for that.
And so moved. No, I'm just kidding.
That's what I was saying. Okay, so being no other hands, no other comments, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much.